Mr. President, we have the Honorable Secretary of Tourism, Secretary Frasco, as well as some visitors coming from the city of Tagbilaran, Mr. President. Mr. President,
To the aforementioned guests, welcome to your Senate. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, I move to consider on third reading Senate Bill number 2793. This is the bill on the Philippine Natural Gas Industry Development Act, the printed copies of which were electronically distributed to the members of this chamber on November 8 in compliance with the 3-day rule in the Constitution. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection to the motion?
Mr. President,
The minority leader rather is recognized. What is your pleasure, sir?
So, third reading, do we have a quorum?
Yes,
We have right now. So
Yes, we do.
we made the physical count.
there are 15 members in the building, Your Honor.
Second question is, I thought we were
15
now,
in the session hall, rather.
15 in the session hall right now. I thought we were in the budget process, Mr. President, and our agreement is that we will just insert sponsorship speeches to make good use of the time, Mr. President. So why are we now inserting a third reading of a very substantive piece of legislation where we need also time to prepare for this, Mr. President?
Session is suspended. Majority Floor Leader. To respond to the inquiry of the Minority Leader earlier, yes, we have in the past, and to my recollection, we did this when I was Finance Chair. But this would be, as I had agreed with the Minority Floor Leader, this will be the last until we finish the budget, unless there are sponsorships which the Minority Leader agreed upon during this budget season. Majority Floor Leader.
President, I reiterate my motion to consider on third reading Senate Bill number 2793, the bill on Philippine Natural Gas Industry Development Act, and the printed copies of which were electronically distributed to the members of this chamber on November 8, 2024, in compliance with the rule of the Constitution.
Any
Reiterate my
objection?
motion.
There being none, motion is approved. Secretary General is directed to comply.
An act promoting the development of the Philippine natural gas industry, consolidating for the purpose all laws relating to the transmission, distribution, and supply of natural gas, and appropriating funds therefore. Roll call vote. The Honorable Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva, Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, Senator Zubiri, the Senate President.
With 14 affirmative votes, 3 negatives, Senate Bill number 2793 is approved on third reading. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, Senator Pia Cayetano, the principal sponsor, is seeking the floor.
What is the pleasure of Senators Cayetano and Gatchalian thereafter? Senator Cayetano.
Mr. President, just a very quick statement. I'd just like to thank our colleagues for
The lady may proceed.
I would just like to thank our colleagues for the support for this historic measure, the passage of Committee Report number 304, or the Philippine Natural Gas Industry Development Act. This is a momentous step forward as we strive to achieve energy security and sustainable economic growth. This legislation supports our own and also international commitments to cleaner and more efficient energy production. We have to remember that natural gas is a transition fuel, and our goal is to move to renewables. This also protects consumer welfare because with the entry, with the encouragement of more investments in natural gas, we will have energy security that will be able to provide for more accessibility to natural gas, and consumers will be able to benefit from this. Again, historically, indigenous natural gas has been cheaper, and to have more opportunities for natural gas will only make the prices even cheaper. I thank all our colleagues, and we are looking forward to see the benefits of this measure, not tomorrow, not at the end of the year, because energy security is a generational commitment. So this is for the next generation. Hopefully we all live healthy lives to see the benefits of this measure. Thank you, Mr. President.
Noted and entered into the records. What is the pleasure of the Honorable Gatchalian?
Mr. President, requesting to explain my vote, Mr.
The
President.
gentleman may proceed.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I rise today to cast my no vote on the proposed Philippine Natural Gas Industry Development Act. At the onset, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the esteemed sponsor, Senator Pia Cayetano, for taking the time to engage in thoughtful discussions with this representation and for her dedication to this bill. While we fully acknowledge the importance of indigenous natural gas in bolstering the nation's energy security, this representation believes that we must balance this with the cost impact on consumers. Our foremost obligation is to ensure that the welfare of our people remains at the center of our legislative actions, especially when it comes to energy pricing, which has a direct impact on every Filipino household. My primary concern centers on Section 23 of the bill regarding natural gas supply, specifically on two major points. First, the impact it will have on the merit order. The bill states that power produced from indigenous natural gas shall have priority over conventional energy sources. This means that even if power from other conventional energy sources will have a lower bid in the wholesale electricity spot market than power from indigenous natural gas, the latter will still be prioritized. This will push up spot prices, thereby placing the burden on higher prices on consumers. Second, the absence of a competitive bidding or price discovery mechanisms for the procurement of indigenous natural gas. Competitive bidding or price discovery serves as a means to discover the lowest possible price, promoting efficiency among investors and ensuring that consumers benefit from the most affordable rates. Without this essential process, there is no concrete assurance that consumers will pay the lowest price and investors will render the most efficient service. Moreover, we need to be reminded that while Malampaya is our own, it is priced and paid in US dollars, which subjects consumers to foreign exchange risk that can further increase costs, much like imported fuel. This underscores the need for competitive bidding or price discovery to ensure consumers pay only the lowest price possible. In addition, a mandated offtake for indigenous gas without competitive bidding or price discovery would allow indigenous gas suppliers to set prices without restriction, potentially resulting in higher costs passed on to consumers. The absence of price discovery and price control at the upstream stage, ang unang hakbang ng produksyon kung saan kinukuha ang natural gas mula sa mga likas na pinagkukunan, coupled with a minimum supply requirement and minimum percentage requirement at the downstream level, kung saan ang mga nakuhang supply ay ipinamamahagi sa gas power plants at ibinebenta ang kuryente galing sa mga ito upang magamit ng mga consumer, raises a significant price risk to consumers affecting their welfare. This could lead to increase in electricity rates as consumers are required to buy electricity from gas power plants, who are in turn required to buy indigenous gas. If this bill is passed, consumers will be required to pay for indigenous gas even when it is more expensive than imported gas. For example, Meralco's latest competitive selection process results show that levelized cost of electricity using imported gas is 7.7 pesos per kilowatt hour, while a blended indigenous gas and imported gas costs 8.45 pesos per kilowatt hour. Once enacted, consumers will be mandated to pay the higher rate that uses indigenous gas. This means, based on the example, an average household consuming 200 kilowatt hours per month will pay an additional 276 pesos when they could have paid less. Mr. President, our responsibility to the Filipino people is to protect their interests and to act as guardians of consumer welfare. For these reasons, with the goal of ensuring a fair and balanced energy market that puts consumers first, I cast my no vote on this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Gatchalian. Noted and entered into the records.
President, the Deputy Minority Leader is seeking the floor.
What is the pleasure of the Honorable Ontiveros?
Mr. President, if I may also be allowed to explain my vote.
The lady may proceed.
Salamat Abi, Mr. President. I must respectfully vote no on Senate Bill number 2793, despite the acceptance of some of my amendments, for which I thank the good sponsor, notably the provision on stranded assets. This provision, by the way, is mainly an antidote to the logic of excessive encouragement of investors in the natural gas industry. My primary reasons for opposing this bill align with some of the deep concerns articulated by Senator Gatchalian. This bill prioritizes indigenous natural gas, potentially undermining and abandoning the least cost principle, which is a crucial safeguard for Filipino consumers against unreasonable electricity prices. This departure from the least cost principle of EPIRA as a principle and procedural guide pertains to fuel selection by the aggregator and generators, generator selection by distribution utilities, and dispatch of generators by the WESM, and is simply unacceptable. Under this bill, the domestic natural gas sector will be under no pressure at all to match their selling price with what is available from regional and global markets. Despite that, the Philippine energy sector is required to purchase everything that the sector will produce. Even the most inefficient wells will be guaranteed a market. This abolition of the least cost principle creates harmful barriers to entry. Just as it would be unwise for, say, a family to dismiss the potential of fiber optic internet based solely on current costs, policymakers should carefully weigh the costs and benefits of both imported and indigenous natural gas. A smart approach would be for the family to encourage fiber optic development, acknowledging its future cost reductions and superior performance, even if it seems less favorable at present. This abandonment of the least cost principle may even affect, without categorically saying, the greatest potential of renewable energy to drive down electricity cost, especially when more and more investments are encouraged into this sector rather than to another fossil industry, which future is clearly defined in climate negotiations as a false solution and unsustainable. The bill's stance on cross-ownership is particularly troubling. My proposed amendment, which would have granted the Energy Regulatory Commission the authority to determine cross-ownership limits for LNG facilities, was rejected. This amendment was inspired by concerns over badly regulated, potentially misbehaving monopolies, particularly in the transport segment of the gas industry. I believe that allowing the ERC to set cross-ownership limits when it saw fit, but not necessarily right at the start, would have fostered fair access and competition among common facilities and ultimately benefit consumers. This approach would allow us to learn from the challenges experienced with the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines and its control over transmission lines. The bill's sponsor argued that such restrictions would discourage investment, especially in the nascent natural gas industry. She believed that ownership of storage and transportation facilities by one entity would accelerate investments. She also maintained that cross-ownership restrictions would have been premature for an industry in its early stages, and also said there was also that option of building one's own gas transport infrastructure. I'm still not sure if the sponsor seriously meant what she said, that other entities needing to transport gas supplies, instead of relying on cross-ownership restrictions that would eliminate bias in favor of a sister company, should instead be ready to build their own facilities. During the pandemic, Mr. President, we set up rules for the use of common towers so different telcos could transmit their signals because we knew that it made no sense to do otherwise. This bill, in its current form, could perpetuate past mistakes in our energy sector. I urged my fellow senators to carefully consider these concerns as we proceeded with this important legislation. As we speak, the United States' own ramping up of gas production for export abroad, which started way before the Russia-Ukraine war, is set to turn President-elect Donald Trump into a salesman for what is expected to be a gas oversupply. The U.S. became the biggest natural gas exporter when it was able to quickly fill up the gas demand after Europe could no longer secure gas from Russia. And there's much more where that came from. U.S. export capacity is set to about double in the next 5 years. Qatar is also expanding its production. This at a time when the major gas demand centers of the EU, Japan, and Korea seem set to reduce their demand. Meanwhile, we pushed for this law that will single-handedly try to add still more to that looming oversupply. Salamat tabi, Mr. President.
Noted and entered into the records. Thank you, Senator Rivera. What is the pleasure of the Honorable Cayetano?
Mr. President, I would just like to clarify a few matters. It's a very important bill. This bill, to be clear, is good for the country. It is good for the environment, and it is good for every consumer. This bill will help us, just like agricultural products, ensure that we have our own supply. We can be a nation importers if that is what we want. But no, we take a stand and we decide that we want to develop our own indigenous sources. Renewable energy currently under existing laws already has priority. Sila ang mauuna. This is now a transition fuel that we are also saying bigyan din ng priority because indigenous fuel to. Hindi lang puro importation. To make it clear, pwede pa rin mag-import. Anyone who wants to import can still do that, but now we are paving the ground for indigenous sources, which will make it cheaper for our consumers. Mr. President, to also be very, very clear, we have price mechanisms. We have transparency. The law is very clear about fair and open access. Hindi po totoo na hindi malalaman ang presyo. Hindi po totoo na ipipilit sa mga consumers ang mamahalin na presyo. Ilang beses ko po pinakita sa chart sa ating mga kababayan at sa ating mga kasama na historically, napakababa nga ng presyo ng indigenous gas. So wag ho natin takutin ang ating mga kababayan na by prioritizing indigenous gas, magmamahal. Hindi po totoo yon. And what I'd also like to emphasize, Mr. President, is currently, ngayon, ang mga power plants nagne-negotiate ng kanilang mga bibilhin na, kung anong presyo nila bibilhin yung fuel supply nila. Nagne-negotiate, wala akong bidding. So wala ho akong pinapalitan. Hindi ko ho tinatanggalan ng bidding kasi wala akong bidding dun sa level na yon. Negotiated po yon. Those are supply agreements. Ganun pa rin. Same ang patakaran. Fair and open access to all the information available. So again, I repeat, this bill is good for the country. This bill is good for the environment. And this is good for the Filipino consumers. Thank you.
Noted once more and entered into the records. Majority Floor
Mr.
Leader.
President, Senator Raffy Tulfo would like to issue a manifestation as well. I move that he be recognized.
Senator Tulfo is recognized. What is the pleasure of the good gentleman? A manifestation?
Yes, Mr.
The
President.
gentleman may proceed.
Mr. President, my esteemed colleagues in the Senate, good afternoon. When I filed this bill back in May 2023, I realized how complex the energy industry was. That being said, there was a very simple principle that I discovered then and which I recognize now. And that is, if our energy security depends on imports, then that is no security at all. In fact, it gives us a false sense of energy security. This was all proven to us during the spark of Russian and Ukraine war, where oil industry was held hostage by factors out of our control. We are lucky that this did not heavily affect the electrification of our major cities and critical facilities. But we cannot afford to risk being dependent on luck and external circumstances when it comes to ensuring that our essential services, economic infrastructure, and continuity of business operations remain unstable. To address this and ensure our country's sustainable growth, the Department of Energy needs power generated from gas to go from 20% of the country's energy mix to 40% in less than 20 years. This is even larger than the share of renewable energy. Indeed, natural gas power is critical to our country's economic growth. And while I'm a strong supporter of renewable energy, I similarly recognize its limitations at the moment. For example, solar energy's availability and generation is affected by weather conditions, such as cloud cover and time of day. Similar with wind energy, this volatility means that we cannot safely rely on renewables as our electricity base load until technology overcomes these limitations in an economical manner. Hopefully, technology could be developed in the future to address these concerns. But for now, natural gas is of utmost importance to our energy security, and it is urgent that we develop our own indigenous sources of gas. Mr. President, mahirap ang umasa sa iba, and we've been this with other countries who were too dependent on foreign sources, such as some of our neighbors in Southeast Asia. The Natural Gas Act provides enough incentives for the development by private entities to ensure total independence from foreign sources. Natural gas, by its nature and by the technology present, gives enough reliability against the predictability of weather. Lastly, the provision of the bill would ensure that no sudden price fluctuation would occur in the energy market, making energy more available and affordable at the same time, so that the simple Filipino household and not only big businesses would benefit from the passage of this act into law. I would like to manifest my appreciation to Senator Pia Cayetano, my successor at the Senate Committee on Energy, for championing this bill on the floor. I ask my colleagues to look into the wisdom of this law and the policy of our transition from coal to natural gas. The research submitted to the committee during the deliberation of this bill will give us enough reason to approve this measure with haste. The Philippine Downstream Natural Gas Industry Development Act will drive a new age for indigenous oil and gas exploration and utilization. Filipino natural gas is for the Filipino people. This is the best kind of energy security that we can secure this nation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Noted and entered into the records. Majority Floor Leader.
President, Senator Robin Hood Padilla is likewise seeking the floor.
Senator Padilla is recognized for his manifestation.
Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo. Una po sa lahat, gusto ko pong batiin ang senadora mula sa Taguig Pateros, Senator Pia Cayetano, sa napakagandang panukala po na ito, sapagkat kung matatandaan niyo po, September 5, 2022, nung ako po ay gumawa ng privilege speech. At yung pong patungkol po sa oil and gas exploration, ang akin pong iminungkahi, sapagkat sa akin pong palagay, ito po talaga ay makatutulong sa ating ekonomiya. At ganun din po, ako din po ay nandito upang purihin din po ang atin pong minority leader, Senator Risa Ontiveros at si Senator Win Gatchalian, sa kanila naman pong ibang naratibo. At ito po ay pagpapatunay lamang ng ating pagiging balanse dito po sa ating Senado. Ngayon po, ang akin pong mungkahi sa pagtayo, bilang paulit-ulit pong inuulit ang salitang indigenous, hinihiling ko po sa akin pong mga kasama na meron pong kapatid yan, yung indigenous. Kung may indigenous gas po, meron pong indigenous people. Alam niyo po, ito pong mga exploration na nagaganap, kadalasan po, kapag ka nagkaroon po ng mga minahan, napapabayaan po yung ating mga indigenous. Kaya ako po'y nagpapasalamat din sa ating pong SP, Senate President, at akanya pong isinulong po dito sa panukala na ito, yung ating pong amenda na nagbibigay po ng proteksyon sa mga indigenous people. Kaya muli po, gusto ko lamang pong pasalamatan ang lahat ng aking mga kasama, maging pabor man o hindi pabor sa batas na ito, ang akin lang pong muling hiling. Sana po sa kaduluduluhan, ang makinabang po ay yung ating mga katutubo. Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay po.
Noted and entered into the records. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration of House Bill number 10800 under Committee Report number 335. This is the bill on the 2025 General Appropriations Act. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, resumption of consideration of the aforementioned bill, as well as its committee report, is now in order.
Mr. President, I move that we resume consideration. 1 minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session suspended.
Mr. President,
Majority Floor Leader.
there being no other reservation for interpellation, insofar as the budget of the Department of Budget and Management, Office of the Secretary is concerned, I move, Mr. President, that the same be deemed submitted for the body's consideration. I so move, Mr. President.
Before acting on the motion, what is the pleasure of the Honorable Villanueva?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. This is just
Maybe
to-
ask the mic to be turned on, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, this is just to make a very short manifestation before we act on the motion
The
of the majority
gentleman may
leader.
proceed.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. President, upon consultation with the Secretary of DBM, I was about to, I'm supposed to raise concerning issues on unfunded loss, and I was made to believe that the department, through the Secretary, would just submit the breakdown, Mr. President, because of the 205 laws identified already by the DBM with funding deficiencies. 46 are with specified budgetary requirements provided for in the law or determined by the DBM or the implementing agency. And the remaining 159 laws have unspecified budgetary requirements. So with that, Mr. President, I have no more objection, and again, put into the records of this August chamber that ever since, Mr. President, we have been supportive of the budget of the Department of Budget and Management. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank
We
you,
thank
Majority.
Honorable Villanueva for his magnanimity and understanding. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, the minority leader is seeking the floor.
The Minority Floor Leader is recognized.
Yes, we thank this good Senator Villanueva for raising that issue of unfunded loss. I think the Senate President once upon a time also raised this issue here before this body, that we have so many laws which we pass which are not being funded. So, andito na rin naman ang DBM. May we get information? May we get, they will submit? Okay, so they have committed to submit. So, copy furnish na lang po kami. But kailangan malaman natin ito kasi nga naman kailangan isabuhay yung mga batas. Otherwise, we will be reinforcing what Senator Legarda has observed, that in the Philippines, laws are optional. Sabi niya. Kasi even the funding of our laws, hindi natin siniseryoso. So we are awaiting the report of the DBM Secretary. But we make it of record that she is present right before us. And then last Thursday, she was also present, and I think we excused her presence for the Friday session. So, but andito pa rin po siya. So we commend the Secretary for really, yes, for being very hardworking and for being here to set an example to the other agencies, Mr. President, na kung wala yung head of agency, baka gawin nating issue sa susunod na sa mga other agencies. So we welcome the Secretary. Thank you for your presence.
Just to correct, the Secretary was present on a Wednesday but had to leave for a foreign trip on a Thursday. But anytime you want to have sessions on a Friday, Minority Leader, we would be more than willing to accommodate your request. Acting on the motion of the Majority Floor Leader, the budget of the DBM, Office of the Secretary proper, is now deemed submitted. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we resume the period of interpellation of the budget concerning the allocation to local government units, particularly the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Grace Poe, and to interpellate Senator Coco Pimentel, the Minority Leader.
Senator Pimentel is recognized for his question.
Thank you, Mr. President. We just want to take advantage of the presence of the Chief Minister.
As promised, the Chief Minister is likewise here, the head of the agency, Your Honor.
But the fund is being administered by the DBM, if I'm not mistaken, no? So may we know the. I think the BARMM is obligated to give the national government, then as well as the both houses of Congress, parang periodic financial reports or periodic reports, especially on the level or the balance of the various funds being given to BARMM. So may we get the latest information on the health of the various funds being administered, fiscal health, according to former Senate President Big Subiri. Of the various, I think they have the block grant, and then the BARMM also has a special development fund, and then BARMM has MOOE allocation in the GAA. Please correct me if I'm wrong, ma'am. Tatlo lang ba? Tatlo. Ilang funds yung binigay mo? Kanina. Inaral natin to kanina.
The distinguished sponsor, the Honorable Poe, is recognized and may respond.
Tsaka yung MOE, sabi mo. Tatlo. Oh, sa GAA nga, sabi ko. Itong dalawa sa BOL to. Okay. Tignan lang natin yung fiscal health.
Ready to resume, Mr. President? Yes. These are the figures from 2020 to 2024. The total appropriations for BARMM is 380,615,213,000. Now, the utilization is at 290 billion 77,392,700.13. The budget utilization rate from 2020 to 2024 is 76.21%, while the disbursement rate from 2020 to 2024 is 63.38%.
Now for this year, for 2025 budget, the ALGU for BARMM is 10.9 billion. Tama po yun, ma'am?
Yes, Mr. President.
What is the use of the 10.9 billion? So hindi siya special development fund kasi iba yon, hindi rin siya sa block grant. What is that for?
The 10.9 billion, the allocation to BARMM has two components. Actually, the 10.9 are new appropriations. 5 billion are shares in national taxes, and 5 billion will be for special development funds.
Okay.
5.9 are share in national taxes.
5.9. So okay, so sa 10.9 billion, kasama pala doon si Special Development Fund na 5B.
Yes, Mr.
Okay.
President.
So itong 10.9, i-add natin ito doon sa block grant. And that's the total now allocation for BARMM.
Which is
Okay.
94.41 billion.
So 94.41.
17% higher.
0.41 billion. Okay. Yes. That's the 94.4 billion would be the total allocation for BARMM, composed of three elements. That would be the block grant, the Special Development Fund, and the share in the national taxes. So yan po as. Okay. So at least naklaro na po Siguro, may we get from the chairwoman, what's the position of the BARMM leadership on the proposal to postpone the election of next year?
Since there's a resolution, Mr. President, the members of the BARMM will have a meeting regarding this, and at the proper time, they will give their opinion regarding the matter.
So naunahan sila ng dyaryo, ng periodic, kasi may parang may reports. That's why tinatanong ko just to confirm, kasi andito I think the Chief Minister is here with us. So inunahan sila ng dyaryo, wala pa palang official position. Kasi ito po nasa Philippine Daily Inquirer, page A6, MILF wants BARMM polls in 2025. So once, hindi once the postponement, once.
Mr. President, that's the MILF position.
Yes,
That's one position that may be considered in their deliberation, but the BARMM itself has not come up with their decision with regard after the consultation.
Correct. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, I also confused the two entities. So thank you for that. So, sige, okay. Assistant Subiri, Mr. President.
Mr. President, may I be recognized?
Yes, please, Senator
Thank you.
Zubir is
Thank you.
recognized.
Yes, as the two principal authors of the Bangsamoro Organic Law is here, the former Senate President and now Minority Floor Leader, Senator Nene Pimentel, and myself,
Coco, sir, si
Coco
Coco.
Pimentel, yes, Coco Pimentel. Although, tatay naman kaya tatay naman kaya walang problema. That's an honest
naalala niya
mistake.
si Tatay, Mr. President.
Oh, magkatabi kami. We were right beside each other when I
He will
took my
be
first
happy.
term.
He will be happy that he's
And
remembered.
we just like to put on record that as a principal sponsor of the measure, my heart is with the BARMM. My heart is with the BARMM. I'd like to consider myself and proud to say that I'm the father of the BOL, which created the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao. So it pains me pag nag-aaway-away sa BARMM between the cabinet, between the BARMM government and the local government officials. Naipit nga ako so much so that in one province, because I sponsored the extension, I got 0 in that one province. That's a true story. But I stood fast. I stood fast because I was working on the assumption that postponing at that time, due to the pandemic, was the right thing to do. So we'd like to now hear, I'm not saying I'm not closing the doors for an extension. Yung akin lang sana is if they can give us a good answer, why is there still a need to have an extension of 1 year when it should be under the Supreme Court decision synchronized already with the national and local elections. So yun lamang po, Mr. President, and I would like to listen to my dear colleagues or my dear friends in the BARMM on their position why it should be extended. So I believe the good chairperson of the Committee on Local Government will have another hearing. It will be one more hearing. I couldn't attend last Thursday because I was in Bicol. My mother is from Libon, Albay, so I had to give relief goods there. So I shall be attending the next meeting and ask them honestly because I stood up on the floor and put on record that this would be my last support of an extension. Sabi ko nga, by 2025, dapat magka-eleksyon na. Kasama din si Tol Tolentino. Sabi niya, last na daw yun. Sabi ni Senator Majority Leader Tol Tolentino. Pati si Coco, pati si Risa, nagsabi din na last extension na dapat yun. So, I'm not shutting out the doors completely, but you know where our sentiments are. But we'd like to listen to why it still wants to be, or this need to be extended at this point in time. So with that, we give our full support, Madam Chair, Mr. President. I give my 1,000% support to BARMM. I just want to say that BARMM is one of the fastest growing regions in the country. And Mindanao is growing exponentially because wala na pong gera sa Mindanao. So much so, tourism has tripled in Mindanao. People are now going to Siargao, to Camiguin, to Samal Island. People are no longer afraid to go to Mindanao. And I think kung maayos lang natin talaga yung I'd say the rest of the other problems, which is poverty eradication in the provinces of Mindanao, Mindanao can reach double-digit growth rate, GDP growth rate. As a matter of fact, we're almost there. The whole of Mindanao, we're probably, kasi Bukidnon, Cagayan de Oro, Lano Norte lang kasi po, and Misamis Occidental, medyo 5% yata yung GDP growth rate. But the rest of the Region 10 is already about 7 or 8% GDP growth rate. Kung tuloy-tuloy po ang kapayapaan ng BARMM, tuloy-tuloy po ang kapayapaan at kaunlaran ng buong Mindanao, which will in turn add to the GDP growth rate of the entire country. The entire country. That's why you have my 1,000% support, Madam Chair. And I think whatever support that we can give to BARMM, lalo na yung nangyari sa Sulu, na wala po yung Sulu sa BARMM, so we have to give additional support to Sulu so that they can also go back to the government projects, the government programs, no? And maybe eventually give them an opportunity in the next Congress. I believe in the, what are we, the 12th, we're the 19th Congress. In the 20th Congress, maybe we could file a measure to ask them again, just once and for all, Sulu, if they really want to remain out of BARMM or not. But we will have to amend the BOL with that, Senator Coco, because that has to go through, it's a simple amendment, no need of a plebiscite, but it needs a plebiscite on elections in Sulu. So we can probably do that later on. We just don't have time now. Matatapos na po ang ating 19th Congress. Kaya, you have my 1,000% support for the islands and the provinces, the mainland provinces of BARMM, as well as my support in helping Sulu stand up because of the Supreme Court, on their own, because of the Supreme Court decision recently enacted. So once again, maraming salamat, Madam Chairman, maraming salamat po to the BARMM, maraming salamat, mabuhay po kayo. I will have a book, by the way, book launching on December 4. So I'll be inviting each and every one of our friends from BARMM to join us in the book launch on the road to peace, on the creation of the Bangsamoro Organic Law. Maraming salamat, Chairman. Maraming salamat, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Zubiri.
Mr. President, if I may also include in the record a very positive record that we have right now, that since 2019, actually from 2019 until 2023, in 2019, the poverty incidence in BARMM among families is 54.2%. And now in 2023, it's 23.5%. So, lagpas kalahati ang natanggal sa kahirapan. So 2023 on, we're still about to get the figures for 2024, but that's good to note. So congratulations also to our brothers and sisters in the BARMM and also, of course, our colleague, Senator Zubiri.
Thank you. Majority Leader.
President, since my name was mentioned by the Honorable Zubiri, let me give a quick two-liners. I'm in full support of the budget of the BARMM. I am in full support of the quest for sustainable peace in the BARMM. I'm proud to say that 3 months ago, I had lunch in one of the more beautiful beaches in Basilan. And 2 weeks ago, I had breakfast and lunch in Hulo, Sulu, Mr. President. So, napakaganda po talaga ng ating Muslim area. Mr. President, there being no other reservations for interpellation, I move that the budget for the allocation to the local government units, particularly the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, the BARMM, be deemed submitted for the body's consideration. And so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is hereby approved.
Mr. President, I move for a minute suspension to enable some of our colleagues to have a photo opportunity with the DBM Secretary and members of the BARMM.
Session is suspended.
Mr. President, I move that we consider the budgets of the judiciary, including the following: the Supreme Court of the Philippines and the lower courts, the Presidential Electoral Tribunal, the Sandigan Bayan, the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Tax Appeals, and recognize the sponsor, the Honorable Senator Grace Poe, and to issue a statement, Senator Raffy Tulfo. I move that they be recognized, Mr. President.
Before that, may we request the officials or the employees, the officials of the various agencies to please settle down so we can proceed immediately. Okay, Senator Raffy Tulfo is recognized.
Mr. President, the chairperson of the committee would like to issue an opening statement.
No,
Mr.
I
President.
think you have, did you recognize Senator Tulfo?
Yes.
Is going to manifest?
But Senator, the chairperson would issue first a
All right.
statement. I move for the recognition of both, Mr. President.
All right, Senator Grace Poe is recognized.
Yes. Before I begin, Mr. President, may I request our OSA to calm down our guests today so that we can begin? Good afternoon, everyone. We would like to extend our warmest welcome to our co-equal branch, the Judiciary. We acknowledge the presence of our esteemed justices, Supreme Court Associate Justice Rodil Zalameda, Justice Samuel Garlan, Justice Mario Lopez, Justice Joseph Lopez, Justice Antonio Co, and Justice Jose Maidas Marquez. From the Court of Appeals, Acting President Justice Fernanda Lampas Peralta, Justice Apolinario Bruselas Jr., and Justice Florencio Mamuag Jr. From the Sandigan Bayan, Associate Justice Rafael Lagos, Justice Carl Miranda, Justice Bayani Jacinto, and Justice Arthur Malabagyo. From the Court of Appeals, Presiding Justice Roman del Rosario, and Justice Corazon Ferrer Flores. Mr. President, it is my duty to present to the body the budget of the Supreme Court and the lower courts, Presidential Electoral Tribunal, Sandigan Bayan Court of Appeals, and the Court of Tax Appeals. Based on the Senate Committee report, the Judiciary's total agency budget for 2025 amounts to 65,785,395,000, composed of 63,889,127 billion as new appropriations and 1.896,268 billion as automatic appropriations. With that, this representation is now ready to accept questions from our colleagues regarding the budget of the Judiciary. Thank
Before
you.
that, Senator Grace, I would like to ask who is the acting presiding justice of the Sandigan Bayan, since the presiding justice has already retired? May I know who?
It's Associate Justice Rafael Lagos.
Justice Lagos. All right. Since Justice Lagos is the acting presiding justice, I will not ask questions anymore because he is my chairman. He might reverse all the decisions against me. Okay.
President, I move that we recognize Senator Raffy Tulfo for
Senator
a
Raffy Tulfo is
manifestation.
recognized.
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning to our dear sponsor of the Judiciary's budget, as well as the other senators present and guests from the Judiciary, particularly all the justices from the Supreme Court present. Nung nangyari po ang pandemic, napilitan po tayong mag-online lahat. And this move was a challenge for the Judiciary. Kasi po, most of the operations and procedures ng judiciary calls for a face-to-face setup. But we all adjusted. And what was admirable with our judiciary, particularly the Supreme Court, they took this as an opportunity to ultimately digitalize their systems and transition some aspects of its procedures online. Mr. President, I fully support the budget of the judiciary, particularly to boost their notable ICT projects such as the e-court project, which aims to provide a unified, intelligent case management system across all levels of the judiciary and the National Justice Information System, which is a data exchange portal to facilitate coordination of agency processes and systems. I'm particularly interested in these projects because I would like to point out the value of statistics in our work here in the Senate. Whenever we draft new bills reviewing existing laws or assess newly passed laws, we look at statistics of cases that have been filed in our courts. Parati po ako nagpapatawag sa mga tao ko sa DOJ o sa Supreme Court Office of the Court Administrator for Statistics. Pero hindi pa po readily available dahil siyempre hingin pa nila ang mga ito sa iba't ibang korte sa buong Pilipinas. I'm hoping that with these new ICT projects funded by the GAA, maisama ang kapasidad ng mga proyektong ito na makapagbigay ng statistics sa atin ukol sa mga kasong nakasampa sa korte. Kung may napaparusahan ba, ilan na nakasuhan, magmula nang ipasa ang batas. At kung ano pa, I'm sure our legislative lawyers are willing to work with the judiciary to give their input on what is usually needed by our institution. Also, if possible, maybe we could have a legislative liaison officer to exclusively address requested data for legislative purpose. We would really appreciate this. Again, I fully support the direction of the judiciary towards the modernization of its operations. This will definitely expedite the delivery of justice and make it efficient and more affordable for the people. Thank you, Madam Sponsor. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Tulfo. Majority Leader.
Next to issue a manifestation or questions to interpolate, Mr. President, is the Deputy Minority Leader, Senator Risa Ontiveros. I move that she be recognized.
The Deputy Minority Leader, Senator Risa Ontiveros, is recognized. May I ask
Salamat,
what-
Mr. President.
May I ask what agency? Supreme Court?
Yes, Mr. President. A few questions for the Supreme
All
Court.
right. Please proceed.
Salamat po, Mr. President. Magandang hapon po, Madam Chair. Mr. President, as I told the good chair earlier, I just have one topic and just a few questions about it. Equal access to justice is mandated by the 1987 Constitution. Article 8, Section 5.5 mandates the Supreme Court to promulgate rules on providing legal assistance to the underprivileged. May I ask what projects the Supreme Court has in this regard, Mr. President?
Mr. President, the Supreme Court drafted the Unified Legal Aid Service, or ULAS, rules, which maximizes access to justice of the indigents and members of the marginalized sectors, and also harmonizes previous issuances of the SE to enforce not only an effective and efficient legal aid service, but likewise a readily available one. The ULAS rules shall govern the mandatory rendition of pro bono legal aid services by covered lawyers to qualified beneficiaries. And the Supreme Court also has the Committee on Access to Justice Underserved Areas, chaired by Senior Associate Justice Leone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My office, and I'm sure many others, receives multiple requests for legal assistance. And even with the presence of the PAO and the IBP, the need for accessible legal services still seems to be elusive for many. Does the Supreme Court, perhaps in line with the ULAS, the presence of a committee within it, and its other programs, does the Supreme Court provide support to alternative legal groups which provide the services of lawyers to the underprivileged? Or are there any plans for this, Mr. President?
Mr. President, not necessarily an alternative route, but also to maximize efficiency and accessibility. There are video conferencings of persons deprived of liberty. As you know, we are an archipelago, so it's sometimes difficult to get a schedule for physical presence, especially for child witnesses and expansion to other court proceedings. There's a remote hearing and equal access to law and justice, or Real Justice program. It's an offshoot of the Justice on Wheels program, wherein buses are retrofitted to serve as mobile complementary courts. Alternative forms of transportation will be used to bring technology to far-flung areas otherwise inaccessible to buses. Recently also, with the Public Service Act, there have been more players to help us with to provide telecommunication services, and with SpaceX, they're able to conduct video conferencing in other areas. In fact, some of our justices have been to Tawi-Tawi, and that's their main area where other small islands are able to access video conferencing. Now, for the actual numbers, the Supreme Court provided subsidies for the Integrated Bar of the Philippines for 2024 and 2025, a subsidy of 130.9 million. This is used by the IBP to strengthen its free legal aid program. For 2024, IBP has helped 51,662 beneficiaries under this program.
Maraming salamat, Madam Chair, especially for mentioning the Justice on Wheels and also this Supreme Court subsidy for the Integrated Bar of the Philippines. Naalala ko po yung Justice on Wheels, isinulat po iyon ng isang dating Chief Justice, kung di ako nagkakamali, si Artemio Panganiban, sa isa sa mga column nila noon sa Philippine Daily Inquirer. Isa sa pinakamagandang o isa sa pinaka-inspiring na column nila, yung tungkol sa tinawag nilang 3 generations of reforms na ipinanganak ng Korte Suprema sa ating judicial system. Tinalakay nila doon yung Justice on Wheels, nakaugnay ng katarungan para sa ating mga mahihirap, yung justice in the area of human rights, so yung kanilang inilabas na writ of habeas data, writ of amparo, at yung justice for the environment or the ecology, yung mga writ of kalikasan at iba pa. At napaka-inspiring na mabasa yun noon at malaman na sinasagawa at ginugunita ito ng Korte Suprema. It made citizens like me look forward to further generations of reforms na pamumunuan ng Korte Suprema. And then to hear now of a more recent innovation, SC subsidies for the IBP. Kasi paraan po yan na parang force multiplier ng ating judiciary within other pillars of the criminal justice system, which also reminds us yung ilan sa mga pioneering advocacies ng bantay katarungan, maybe two decades ago, no? So nakasama doon yung mga dating justices, dating judges, at mga abogado. Lastly, Madam Chair, I was also asking if, for example, in addition dito sa ginagawa na ng Supreme Court na ulas, yung Justice on Wheels, yung pag-subsidize nila sa IBP, are there any plans for the Supreme Court to also provide support specifically to NGOs composed of volunteer lawyers, Mr. President?
Mr. President, actually, for the continued training and education, they have involved interest groups, alternative interest groups, and these are. There was a conference and training involving specifically alternative interest groups. These are cost-oriented groups to further strengthen their role in providing legal services for the underserved sector. As you know, there are advocates who are not necessarily lawyers or members of the court that have specific advocacies that they would like to push for, like ito ngang sa kalikasan. So they're able to know the procedures of the court and have the proper training so that they can gather as much information that would be beneficial for their cause and to push their cases towards a resolution.
Salamat, Madam Chair. But I take it to mean na bukod pa nga dito sa, in a way, para-legal training para sa mga NGOs at advocates groups, so wala po bang plano na to work or to partner with legal NGOs, so mga NGOs na binubuo or may mga miyembrong abogado na, pero magkakaroon din ng partnership with the Supreme Court. So para sa ganitong legal NGOs o kaya legal aid groups, wala po bang plano ang Korte Suprema
Actually,
in this
meron
direction?
namang plano.
Okay, Mr.
Okay,
President.
so there's a request for a developmental and social lawyering fund in the amount of 100 million for NGO lawyering groups. I believe Justice Leonen also has advocated for this, having been in the academe and working with also different NGO lawyering groups. So, Mr. President, at the proper time, seeing that our fiscal space is tight, but there are also probably there's a possibility that this can be proposed and we can consider it during the committee amendments.
Maraming salamat para dyan, good sponsor. And in that direction, I would like to express my full support for this initiative. After all, my office has partnered with legal NGOs in the course of its work. We worked with the IBP Office of Legal Aid to provide assistance to the witnesses of Kian de los Santos. We worked with IDEALS, or the initiatives for dialogue and empowerment through alternative legal services, to help provide legal counsel to the victims of Apollo Quiboloy. Kaya mahalaga po sa akin na ang mabibigyan ng funding ay yung lehitimong mga grupo. So lastly, for this topic and for my interpellation, Madam Chair, how does the Supreme Court intend to accredit legal aid groups, Mr. President?
Per the ULAS rules, the ULAS board shall identify and acknowledge registered organizations para hindi naman hausyaw, di ba? Na masiguro they have the capability and then also the track record of being a true advocate. And then criteria for legal aid groups under this program shall be provided under the ULAS rules. The main consideration is that they should provide pro bono work for free legal aid na, di ba, walang mga hidden costs dyan. Kasi kaya nga sila i-consider under this initiative.
Salamat, Madam Chair. At dahil sa simula pa lang nung interpellation na to, binanggit nyo na yung Unified Legal Aid Service o yung ULAS. So I take it to mean na ipatutupad siya hanggang ngayon ng matagumpay. So tested na po yung mga, kung paano nila ina-acknowledge at ina-accredit yung mga partners nila at yung criteria nila. And inaasahan ko po dahil doon na yun din ay tumpak na magagamit dito sa pag-accredit nila sa mga magiging partners nila dito naman sa developmental and social lawyering program. So yun lamang po, Madam Chair. Nais ko lang i-affirm kasabay ng Chair na totoong magiging tunay na pantay lang ang batas kung ang lahat ay may pantay na access sa serbisyong legal at hustisya. Maraming salamat po, Madam Chair, Mr. President, at mabuhay ang Korte Suprema.
Thank you, Senator Tiveros. Next to interpolate is the Minority Leader, Senator Coco Pimentel.
Mr. President, I'd like to thank Senator Risa because also with the many hearings that she conducted here in the Senate or other groups are able to provide evidence also that can be used by our judiciary.
Thank you. Senator Coco is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of our chairwoman, if I can commence with my interpellation on the budget for the judiciary. Thank you. We welcome the justices from the Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, Sandigan Bayan, Court of Tax Appeals, and I'm sure we also have with us judges of the first and second level courts. This representation, Mr. President, has been requested by the Chief Justice to be the champion for the judiciary, for the judiciary's budget during our last JBC. But I told the Chief Justice I need to harmonize this being the champion of the judiciary's budget with my role as the minority leader. So I think that is the anong tawag mo doon yung merong inherent that's the paradox that we will be solving for today. But I think Senator Alan Cayetano solved it for me when he reminded me of the saying that justice delayed is justice denied. So sabi niya, every minute you delay the justices, you're in effect denying justice indirectly. But may joke po konti kay pag nanggaling kasi kay Senator Alan, may lalo na kung off the record, may marami pong jokes yan, Mr. President. But this will be a very supportive interpellation, Mr. President, because for example, the judiciary, I've been informed, requested a total budget of around 84 billion. Approved ng DBM 61 billion, approved ng ating committee 63 billion. So nagdagdag nga tayo ng 2B. So what did the judiciary have in mind when they proposed 84 billion? What are the more important components of that proposal which would now be impossible to fund in spite of our committee's effort to increase it to 63.8 billion pesos?
Okay, let me break down a few of the big items here that the judiciary branch has proposed. 5.249 billion to utilize technology for the swift and efficient dispensation of justice. Alam naman natin na naghahabol tayo when it comes to technology. On the other hand, we've already commended the judiciary for adapting, especially during the time of the pandemic. And now we see the need also to be able to harness AI intelligence, for example, in certain functions, of course, not all. Or let's say in the transcription and also in certain research backup. The Justice Sector Convergence Program also on the integration of the judiciary into the National Justice Information System and establishment of justice zones where about 336.5 million. Ito kasi yung kasama yung PNP, kasama yung mga iba't ibang mga law enforcement units, I believe, in the justice zone para they can also easily exchange information that will be able to dispense of cases more efficiently. And then the creation of 4 regional trial courts, RTCs in Calawag, Quezon, which is in pursuant to an RA. And then in Muntinlupa City also for pursuant to a law. And then ito po, yung 2025 bar and Sharia bar examinations. Kasi, di ba, meron na tayong Sharia bar. So, syempre, kailangan meron din allocation dyan. Subsidy to the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, which is 130.9 million. Construction of the Sandigan Bayan Building and Training Center for 415 million. And the rehabilitation and upgrading and improvement of the Court of Appeals Building. Kasi medyo kawawa rin naman yung mga facilities natin. And
so yan po yung details ng ating committee report na 2.2 billion na dinagdag. Tama po? Yan po, dyan po pupunta.
Dito sa mga nabanggit natin.
Pero dun sa request ng judiciary na overall parang mga 23 billion ang hindi na pagbigyan, ano ang pinaka-apektado doon na grand project nila, na malaking proyekto po nila? Hindi committee natin ang hindi nag-accommodate, mismong executive branch. Yes, executive branch ang hindi nag-accommodate.
Yun nga yung nasabi natin, sir, additional court managers for about 120.7 million. Tapos, meron din dito yung Unified Health Maintenance Organization or yung HMO, but we were able to see that they
okay,
can source it from their savings also, Mr. President. Tapos, marami po ito.
Di, ano yung pinakamalaki
We-
po? Ano po yung malaki kaya? Kasi 23 billion yung hiningi ng Judiciary, 23
Yung
billion ang hindi na fund. Ano kaya yung pinaka-significant po doon? Pinaka-major project?
Yung salaries po, yung 14.061 billion
Ayun, okay.
for other personal benefits. So lump sum for creation of new positions sa OCJ at saka OAJ. Tapos lump sum for creation of new positions for lower courts upgrading. Usually po additional lawyers, yung mga gano'n na kailangan.
Which in the study of the Supreme Court or belief that the Supreme Court helps in the disposition of cases which addresses one of the two. Meron kasi yun ang aming research, one of the two major issues against the judiciary, which is delay. Yung delay. So yun po. Pero are those proposals like yung mga salary, are those already backed up by law? Or parang wish list lang ng Supreme Court yun?
Well, Mr. President, no, it's not necessarily an increase in salary. It's also the additional positions being requested. So they can really request for that. Doesn't need I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think you need a law to be able to expand your the number of employees that you need. But Mr. President, as you know, there's always the balancing act of fiscal prudence also and fiscal space. But I would like to note that that's also one of the reasons why we are strengthening their ICT capability. Right now, of course, if you don't have the physical presence, you have the video conferencing, and then also with AI, there's certain, of course, we can never replace human talent, but we can always support it with additional research generated from AI, cross-referencing also of cases with AI technology. So this is part of the funding that we have given the judiciary.
Thank you. I also have before me a list of the notable ICT projects of the Supreme Court. Marami-rami naman, pero siguro they need really parang periodic funding for this, no? Para
Of
kasi
course.
nagluluma din ng mga systems, they need to replace them.
Well,
So,
opo,
yes.
next year, yung mga nandito, they have to be able to supplement that.
So we have already mentioned the issue of delay. I just siguro appeal to the members of the judiciary na make good use of your time. Ang dami kasing apektado sa mga kaso. They're really affected by the delay. Kagabi, may kausap ako na practicing lawyer on the trial level. 10 years no pending kaso eh. 10 years, that's too long. I mean, and then, at saka actually, for all the justices here present, since I'm a member of the JBC, nakikita ko rin yung mga feedback to the JBC members. The pendency of cases before you is also being used against the justice when it comes to nomination. Matagal mag-dispose ng kaso, may kaso dyan na pending na ganun katagal. So we really have to address this issue of delay. And of course, I understand that we need the assistance of computers, ICT technology. Pero sa AI, hinay-hinay lang tayo. I don't want anybody to be convicted by AI, Mr. President. Pero joke lang po yun, kasi mga may nanonood sa atin, the courts have no plan of using AI when it comes to judging to adjudicating cases. It must be the capacity of the human mind.
Thank you for the clarification
Yes.
to our minority leader. Yes, again, for the record, we can never really replace human judgment and talent, but we can supplement it. Like, for example, even now, in the past, di ba gumagamit tayo ng Encyclopedia Britannica to be able to do certain research. Right now, we use Google search, di ba? But it doesn't mean that our judgment is reliant upon what we find online alone, di ba? It's also a cross-referencing of our own experiences and studies on the matter.
Kasi when you judge a case, sometimes tinitignan mo yung demeanor ng witness, lalo na sa first and second level courts. So, hindi kaya ng AI. Anyway, napakita ko lang po sa justices na sometime, narito po sa Senado, marunong din tayo mag-joke-joke ng konti. Kasi I'm sure seryoso yung mga deliberations ng ating mga judge, ng ating mga justices. So, ito po ma'am, in writing na lang, may we request from Justice Villanueva a listing of your existing ICT projects and then the status of each one. Siguro, kung ma-mention na rin po yung budget nila para po ma-appreciate natin yung the role of technology in our justice system, Mr. President.
May we submit that
Yes,
for
yes,
the
just
reference
for
of our
submission,
minority
yes.
leader? The entire ICT
Yes.
budget and the line items. Thank you.
Now, let's go to the judiciary marshals. This is a relative new law. And na-implement na po ba natin ito?
Because of that new law, there is already the implementing rules and regulations, but they are now in search of those court top officials. And by the end of this year or first quarter of next year, they will have filled some positions.
Did we already fund the judiciary marshals for 2024? For 2024, meron na. And then for 2025, magkano?
There's an initial allocation now for the 2024 of 250 million. That includes also the Senate committee report. The NEP, it's the same as the NEP, the GAA, and the COMREP, 250 million.
Kasi recurring expense yan eh. Tama? Kasi tao yan eh. Tao, office yan eh. Okay. Sige po. Siguro just a reminder, tama po ba ito, that the primary responsibility of the judiciary marshals is to be responsible for the security, safety, and protection of the members, officials, personnel, and property of the judiciary. Yan po.
And to conduct investigations as well.
Investigations of who?
Crimes committed against judiciary officials and employees.
Okay.
And threats to them as well.
Tama. Because that will contribute to the security of the members if the potential criminal will know that the crime will be solved. Yan yung criminal deterrence, Mr. President. Yan na po yun. Deterrent effect. Meron po tayong justice zone. Siguro isa yun, no? Isa yun sa mga kung nabigay yung request, mas kasi ngayon 9 justice zones. Siguro the plan is to increase the number of justice zones. Ang sabi rito, the justice zone is an opportunity for the judiciary to meet with the justice sector workers and discuss concerns and challenges which should be addressed. But this is in the context of a criminal justice system. Sa criminal law lang po ito, criminal justice, Mr. President. Pang-criminal justice lang po ito, no?
Yes, there are. The question is for the... could you repeat your question again?
Rinaise ko lang yung justice zones kasi ngayon 9. Siguro part doon sa 20 billion na hiningi is paramihin yung justice zones. So
They're now 10.
They're now 10?
Oh,
they're now
yes.
10. Sige.
Of course, we have to be a little bit cautious also, but
Yeah.
because this is an organization that involves not just the judiciary, but also
Yes.
the DILG and the DOJ. So
Which is the 10th justice zone? Ano yung pinakabago?
the last one is Iligan,
Okay, Iligan City.
Osamis, Cagayan de Oro.
But treated as one?
Yes, it's a tri-zone. So yung lugar
Sige
po
po.
ninyo,
Yes.
Mr. President.
Can I just get siguro in writing na lang from the Justice Raul Villanueva examples of the concerns and challenges which were raised and possibly addressed because of the regular periodic meetings pursuant to the justice zone concept? Pero, nabigyan lang po kami ng example. Opo.
The committee will take note, Mr.
Yes.
President.
Para po maging tunay na champion tayo ng judiciary, talagang naintindihan natin yung ins and outs of the judiciary sector, Mr. President. Mr. President, sa Cagayan de Oro, matagal na po itong issue, yung nasunog kasi yung Justice Hall dyan na maybe ilang years ago na po yun. Ilang years ago na po yun, sir? Justice?
Um,
10?
Mga 9 years
9
na.
years ago.
Pero the Cagayan de Oro Hall of Justice is undergoing detailed architectural and engineering design, which will be finished by the second semester of 2025. Thereafter, a contractor will be procured, engaged.
Siguro, ang reaction ko na lang siguro, just to be totally honest, I've heard that before. Actually, siguro 1 or 2. I mean, mga lawyers naman po kami rito, so we can really be totally honest with each other. I
Mr.
think I've heard
President-
that 2 years ago or 3 years ago. But siguro, ganito na lang.
Mr.
What seems to
President.
be the problem? How come it's so complicated, Mr. President, to rebuild a justice hall, Mr. President?
Okay, there was a change of location, Mr. President. So now they expanded it. Na it will be also a court of appeals and a trial court. So it's a complex. So
Now it's a complex. Kaya
Yes.
nga, so to make the matter more complex, it's more than a hall of justice. It's now a justice complex.
It will be another cluster. But I assure you, Mr.
Okay.
President, you will not hear it, at least in this plenary, next year.
Correct. I know that. I know that. I won't be here to hear that. Even to ask that question, I will not be here, Mr. President. So, but we have many friends here whom we can ask to request to ask that question, Mr. President. So, kumusta na po ang judges at large law po natin? Is it working in accordance with the objectives of the law? I mean,
There are 50 justices at large, Mr. President. And
judges.
judges at large, and they are working on different locations in vacant courts.
May I know?
Oh, yes.
May I know who appoints, with all due respect to the minority leader, who appoints the justices, judges at large?
I think our minority leader, because it goes through the JBC from the President's
Yeah, so
recommendation.
eventually, is it-
Shortlisting. Final appointment would be the president, just like a normal judge, no? Yes. Ganun.
All
Just
right.
like
Thank you. And in correlation with the line of questioning of the minority leader, may I know the status of the Justice Hall in the city of Manila?
Yeah.
Because if my memory serves me right, when my father was still the mayor of the city of Manila, that was his project when he was still mayor of Manila.
It's going through a detailed engineering and architectural design. It's ongoing.
So it hasn't started yet. No construction has started yet.
Second quarter of 2025, they will be able to get the contractor. So by next year, Mr. President, it should start.
All right. Thank you for the information. Senator Pimentel?
Yes, Mr. President, ito lang po yung IBP subsidy natin. When did this start? Madam Chairperson, 130.9 million yata for next year. Pero I think for this year, meron din yata tayong binigay. When did this start? Tagal na?
What do you mean, the appropriations
The
for
subsidy to the Integrated Bar of the Philippines.
subsidy? Every year, 100 million in 2019.
Yes.
Every year, and then now, that's 2019, 100 million. Now we stand at 2024, 130 million, 900.
Sige po, kasi the IBP is under the supervision of the Supreme Court. May mga lawyers na nakapansin that our IBP membership fees have been increasing the rate or the amount. So, saan kaya, anyway, nasagot na yata kanina yung subsidy, not really meant for the membership fees, but for the free legal aid program. Sige po. So, meaning to say, the lawyers, the IBP lawyers who render free legal aid are being compensated from this fund?
Yes, Mr. President.
Okay, ganda. Okay, maganda. Agree po ako dun. Okay, so Mr. President, in writing na lang po yung mga hiningi natin kasi sabi nga, so we have taken much time of our justices. Baka ma-minus na yun sa kanilang ano. They could have spent the time writing their decisions to address one of the issues. There are two issues, justices, para lang alam nyo po, kwento-kwento sa taong bayan. One is delay, second one is corruption. So, ano lang po natin, address lang po natin yun. Address lang na address kasi yung allegation of corruption, syempre, when you make a decision, not everyone is happy. Kasi ano tayo, adversarial yung ating system, hindi A versus B. You make a decision in favor of A, B is unhappy. And of course, madali lang ang pakawala ng salita. So, yung mga allegations of corruption, we really, kung merong ganun, I really ask for proof. Ano naman ang masabi mo? Kasi siyempre, pwedeng disgruntled, ano lang yun, na litigan. But I'm happy that the Supreme Court has initiatives to address the two issues. There may be more, but yun po yung parati kong na-encounter. But just keep on, just be conscious of all of this feedback from our people, and then just have continuous programs to address the so-called problems, the biggest problems being thrown against or hurled against our judicial system, Mr. President. So, pero sa ngayon, I think we need to congratulate the entire judiciary, Mr. President, kasi kung ikumpara ko yung negative na naririnig ko ngayon kumpara sa past years, halos wala na po eh. Halos parang broken record na lang na hindi natin masabing pwedeng lang yung katulad na sabi ko parang loose talk lang po. So anyway, congratulations to our judiciary, and dinaanan naman namin yung inyong mga targets. Tinatamaan naman ninyo 100% pa. Kaya nga siguro, Justice Raul, siguro taasan nyo naman. Yung mga cases to be disposed, target cases, taasan nyo naman. Baka naman masyado rin mababa, kaya that's why you're exceeding 100% the target. So,
No, Mr. President, mas marami. Sa ngayon, of course, there's a lot more to be done. But there are more cases, there are more cases being disposed than cases coming in. So, I mean, little by little, I guess the Supreme Court is also, the justice sector is also catching up.
One final point pala. In the issue of delay, so since mag-use na rin tayo ng computers, focus na sa aging. Kasi hindi lang yata yung mabilis ka mag-dispose, pero yung ano ba tawag mo doon? Long pending cases, yung dapat na-address. Sana there is a system with the aid of computers.
Meron na pong ganon nangyari sa last year. There's a directive already that the older ones should be heard, be prioritized. So first in, first out.
So soon mararamdaman na yan kasi kung so it takes time also na maramdaman din yung effect ng program. So congratulations to the Supreme Court and to all the courts, Mr. President. So thank you, Madam Chairperson. Thank you for your patience also.
Thank you to our Minority Leader for clarifying many points, as well as also recognizing the efforts and achievements of our judiciary.
Mr. President, thank you
Thank
to
you,
our Minority Leader,
Leader.
who is also a member of the JBC. Mr. President, the Minority Leader is seeking recognition. The Deputy Minority Leader.
Senator Risa Antiveros, recognized.
Salamat, Mr. President. Good sponsor, wala na pong additional questions. Maikling manifestation lang na pagdating sa proper time, sa period of amendments, baka magtanong lang ako ng konting-konting dagdag pa or gumawa ng maikling manifestation kaugnay po ng mga recently reiterated na advocacies ni Professor Raymond Narag tungkol po sa pretrial detention at saka bail para po sa mapakinabangan po natin kung ano yung thought processes at harinawa at malamang pagkilos ng Korte Suprema tungkol sa mga ito. Salamat po, Madam Sponsor. Salamat, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Risa. Senator Villanueva.
Yes, Mr. President. I will no longer ask questions as I listen attentively to the questions raised by our minority leader. I just like to put into the records how we are appreciating the work being done by our judiciary. And let me also share my sentiments in as far as setting the targets, Mr. President, kasi laging yung 100%, no? And of course, we wanted to make sure that we all understand what it means when you say justice delayed is justice denied. And at the same time, let me congratulate also our friends from the judiciary. And again, to put into the records that this representation had been very supportive of the budget of our judiciary. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator
distinguished colleague.
Villanueva. Just one question, please, addressed to Senator Grace. Is it true that there is a memorandum circular coming from the Supreme Court ordering the lower courts to resolve all cases within 90 days? Am I correct?
That's a regular period, Mr.
Yes.
President.
May-
There's no need for a,
Yes, may I know
A
if they are
memorandum.
following the circular?
are they following? They have.
They have to follow. May I know how many unresolved cases have been, how many cases does the Sandigan Bayan, Court of Appeals, and Court of Tax Appeals, ilan pa ba yung mga unresolved cases doon?
For the Supreme Court, there are 14,756.
14,000.
Yeah.
All right.
Do you want me to go, may I just
No,
submit
just
this?
the numbers, just the numbers.
Court of Appeals, 26,000. I'm sorry, yes. Court of Tax Appeals, 1,500. The lower courts for the regional trial courts, 362,000.
Nationwide.
Nationwide, Sharia, 298. Family courts, 64,000. Metropolitan trial courts, I'm just rounding this off.
Yes, yes.
Metropolitan trial courts, 40,000. Municipal trial courts, 69,000. That's municipal trial courts in city, 69,000. Municipal trial courts, 28,000. Municipal circuit trial courts, 29,000. And Sharia courts, 1,368.
But if they do not comply with the memorandum circular of the Supreme Court, what will the Supreme Court do? Is the Supreme Court going to reprimand these justices or judges?
If they don't comply within the 90 days,
Yes.
they can be charged with administrative cases.
Has there already been a precedence?
There have been many. There is a latest decision
Marami na bang na-dismiss
involving
ng mga
an
judges
RTC
tungkol
judge
dun?
in Antipolo.
How many cases have been filed against, administrative cases has been filed against these justices who did not or does not want to comply with the circular of the Supreme Court?
There are about 250 cases pending involving judges.
Only judges, lower
Yes.
courts. That means RTC and MTC.
Yes.
All right, thank you for the information. Majority Leader?
Mr. President, there being no other reservation for interpellation, I move that the budgets of the judiciary, including the following: the Supreme Court of the Philippines and the lower courts, the Presidential Electoral Tribunal, the Sandigan Bayan, the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Tax Appeals be deemed submitted for the body's consideration. I so move, Mr. President.
Before I act on the motion, the Chair would also like to manifest my full support for the passage of the budget of the judiciary, including, of course, the Supreme Court, the Presidential Electoral Tribunal, the Sandigan Bayan, most especially the Sandigan Bayan, Court of Appeals, and the Court of Tax Appeals. Okay, there's a motion by the Majority Leader. Any objection? There being none, the motion is hereby approved.
Mr. President, I move for a minute suspension to
Session
enable our
suspended.
colleagues to have a photo session with the justices present here. Mr. President, I move that we consider the budget of the Anti-Money Laundering Council and recognize the sponsor, Senator Grace Poe, and to interpolate the Honorable Deputy Minority Leader, Senator Risa Ontiveros. I
Is there
move
any
that they be
objection?
recognized.
Hearing none, the motion of the Majority Leader is carried. We recognize the hard-working chairperson of the Senate Committee on Finance, Senator Grace Poe, and to interpolate our Deputy Minority Leader, Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like, thank you for the kind introduction. I would like to acknowledge the Anti-Money Laundering Council, headed by Executive Director Matthew David. Mr. President, again, it is our duty to present to the body the budget of AMLC. Based on the Senate Committee report, AMLAC's total agency budget for fiscal year 2025 is 213,328,000, consisting entirely of new appropriations. With that, this representation is now ready to answer, to accept questions.
Thank you, Senator Grace Poe. We recognize our Deputy Minority Leader, Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Salamat po, Mr. President, at magandang hapon po muli, Madam Chair. Isang paksa lamang po para sa AMLAC at dalawang tanong lamang po tungkol doon. So your office, the council, has been instrumental in pursuing cases against Guo Huaping, alias Alice Guo. Pero sa mga hearing po natin, lumabas na kahit mahigpit ang batas natin sa money laundering, tila hindi naman nagko-comply ang mga bangko sa reportorial requirements para ma-flag ang illegal activities. Ano pong ginagawa ng AMLAC tungkol dito, Mr. President?
Mr. President, the AMLAC opened the enforcement action proceedings against those banks involved in Alice Guo's case to determine if they have violated the requirement under AMLA to file STRs with the AMLC. These proceedings are ongoing, and should the AMLC find that they indeed violated the said requirement, the AMLC will file formal charges against said banks, where they may be liable for fines ranging from 250,000 to 500,000 per transaction, but not exceeding 10 to 20 million, depending on the attendant circumstances. This is without prejudice to their criminality liability under AMLA if their officers are found to have knowingly facilitated the crime of money laundering. Of course, there's nothing better than preventing it, and prevention actually can be done if there's strict enforcement of the law. So we are looking forward to AMLC's cases that they are actually able to prosecute those that may be found to have caused these money laundering activities.
Salamat po, Madam Chair. It's good to know na nagbukas na nga po yung Council ng Enforcement Action Proceedings at merong pong ganitong mga detalye silang tinatakda na pwede nilang gamitin para nga po mapakomply yung mga bangko sa kanilang mga obligasyon sa ilalim ng batas. It's a quite wide range of possible fines mula 250,000 pesos to 20 million pesos. Pero tama lang siguro, lalo na yung upper range dahil kahit nung ating investigasyon kay Guo Huaping, lumabas na mayroong mga pambihirang mga amounts at any one time na mukhang money laundered in the billions of pesos sa mga individual o di umano'y family companies nila, hindi naman ma-account for kung saan nanggaling yung mga monies na iyon. Pero dumaan sa mga bangko at hindi proactively tumulong ang mga bangko sa AMLAC para i-flag ito. So huling tanong ko na lamang po, good sponsor sa paksang ito at sa interpellation ko, kung ganito po yung direksyong tinatakbo ng AMLAC sa ngayon, ano pong suporta ang kailangan ng council para siguraduhin na una, yun na nga, sumusunod ang mga bangko at financial institutions sa mga obligasyon nila sa batas at may kapasidad ang AMLAC na imbestigahan ang mga ni-report na suspicious o covered transactions bago pa lumago gaya ng sindikato ni Guo Huaping, Mr. President?
Mr. President, AMLC needs support to procure and sustain the artificial intelligence project and other significant program of AMLC like subscription of security IT software. This is why we added additional funding under the Senate committee report for the artificial intelligence project of AMLC to help them evaluate the great number of suspicious transactions reports that they receive. Kasi syempre kung mano-mano yan, manual, di ba? Napakahirap daily how many transactions are there in the bank. So even if you have a threshold, there are still thousands of them. And then the passage or amendments of the AMLA, the amendments to the AMLA to ensure compliance with the Financial Action Task Force, the standards, and to ensure that the Philippine government can cope with evolving money laundering risks.
Salamat, Madam Chair, at alam natin, kailangan nating gawin ang mga ito para din makagraduate sa mga gray list or kung ano pa mang mga list regionally at saka globally. And well-minded po tayo na suportahan nga at magpasa ng pinakamahusay na amendments na kaya nating gawin para sa AMLA. At huli po, Madam Chair, siguro katulad nung observation ninyo nung tinatalakay natin yung budget ng Judiciary. So, nandiyan na nga yung AI, sinasabing importante rin mag-put in place ng protocols at saka safeguards dyan. And I suppose, tulad nung sinabi ninyo dun sa pagganap ng judiciary nung mandate niya, ay ganun din po, halos kung hindi man eksakto sa AMLAC, na bagamat napakahalaga na gagamit ng ating mga departments at agencies, pati councils, yung in a way, SIGINT or Signal Intelligence and mga teknolohiya tulad ng AI, wala po talagang kapalit yung human intelligence, yung wisdom, yung insight, minsan yung hunch, yung instincts na nasa tao at hindi kailanman kayang i-develop o i-simulate ng teknolohiya. So, maraming salamat, Madam Chair, at sinusuportahan ko po yung efforts ninyo na makapagpa-budget tayo ng sapat at maayos para dito sa Anti-Money Laundering Council. Thank you. Salamat po, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Risa. In fact, if the AMLC is actually strengthened, a lot of the issues that were tackled here in the Senate with regards to the POGO could have been prevented early on because of all of those suspicious transactions in the billions of pesos. Kung na-flag yun early on, baka hindi din lumaganap ng ganyan kalaki.
I totally agree. Thank you, Senator Risa, Majority Leader. The next to interpellate is the distinguished Minority Leader, Senator Coco Pimentel. You are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. What we know from the AMLAC or AMLC, what are the important thresholds when it comes to covered and then mandatory, yung mga mandatory reporting as well as yung optional reporting?
The covered transactions threshold is 500,000 pesos, but of course, there's also the KYC and covered persons criteria. Like, alam nyo, minsan may mga nakakalusot kasi na mababa sa 500,000, pero regular. Di ba nakita natin yun in one of our hearings before the Committee on Banks. So, that's also something that we can check on, is a pattern.
To summarize nga, pagka 500,000 pesos and above yung transaction, that's what is called covered transaction. Meaning
Yes,
to say,
Mr.
it
President.
must be reported to the AMLC. But transactions in smaller amounts may be reported or must be supported when they are suspicious? What is this?
Mr. President, ganito po yun. Just for the record, kasi also for our information, 500,000 is the general threshold for covered transactions. But for jewelers, registered as jewelers, nasa 1 million. Casino cash, 5 million. And real estate, 7.5 million.
Okay. So may general rule but may tatlong subcategories. But then for those four sectors, may general rule and then may three na sectors. Even if it's below the threshold amount, mayroong concept of suspicious transaction. Ganun po ba 'yan?
Smaller amounts may be reported if the suspicious as STR.
Ano STR? A suspicious
Oo,
transaction
so
report.
actually, that's
STR.
where siguro also the judgment, no? The judgment of the banks will come into place. Because if they're like small amounts but consistent, or they feel that there's something irregular about it, they have an obligation to report it.
So yes, the covered entities like or institutions like banks must report. Ganun yung instruction sa kanila. Okay, so kaya nga ang tanong ko nga ang ating pong budget ay 213 million pesos. Kasama na dun yung personal services. Tama po? Hindi.
Oh, that's that's handled by the BSP.
So may
yung
we
sa
know.
kanila.
Okay, so may we know the entire budget, meaning to say the governmental expenditure for AMLC to function properly. Sige.
Yes. While we are getting that figure, Mr. President, I would also like to put it on the record, also para dun sa mga nakikinig, that STRs, regardless of the amount, as long as it falls under any of the suspicious circumstances enumerated under the law, pwede rin talaga silang ma-report.
And then klaro naman sa mga circular ninyo, what are the suspicious transactions? Klaro yan, di ba? Sige po.
Nasa batas ng AMLC.
Kasi yung natanong kanina, are the banks complying or the other covered institutions? So that's why pumapasok ako ngayon sa personnel ninyo, yung manpower ninyo. Kaya gusto ko nga malaman, sweldo galing BSP. Tama po ba yan? Tama. But about sa totality of the manpower of the AMLC?
For the proposed budget, it's 346,030,574. Yung nabanggit nga nating budget, hindi naman umabot dun sa ganon. Nasa 213 lang. Pero, hold on, Mr. President.
Hindi, pero ano itong 346 na binabanggit ni Grace? Totality ng hiningi. Not yet. Pero hindi ba kasali sweldo dyan? Kasama. Sa akin, kasama ilan yung kanil. So may other sources sila ng pera. Ano pa? So parang maintindihan natin. So ilan? Walang laman. Oo nga, no? Saan ito gagamitin? Capital outlay. Ano nga? Galing. Walang laman sa PS. Galing.
Okay. Mr. President, as you know, the BSP has fiscal autonomy. What we know, so all the payroll, all of the salaries of the personnel of the AMLC come from the BSP. There are 224 of them.
224. So 224 po ang kanilang personnel. Apa. Okay, and then how many covered transactions in the millions are you receiving in a certain period of time? Sa covered lang po.
So for the covered transactions, in 2024, there are about 23,882,000.
So far yon, bale, kasi hindi pa tapos si 2024.
Suspicious circumstance yun, oo.
Covered yon, covered.
Covered.
Covered yon, meaning to say threshold amounts yon. Yung mga suspicious ilan po?
Yun nga, yung suspicious circumstance, 36,
Ilan?
36 million, 897, no. Okay, so this is from 2022 until 2024. The suspicious circumstance, meaning smuggling, swindling, violation of Electronic Commerce Act of 2000, 36,987 for 3 years.
Yung 23 million is for calendar year 2024 only. Tama pa? Or same period?
For 2024, yes, correct, 23 million.
For this calendar year only? Tama, that's
Yes,
right.
so far, Q1 to Q3.
Yes. Pinapakita ko lang po yung enormity ng trabaho ng
Or it could, yeah, it could also be now because AMLC is also catching up faster. So there are more identified under this category.
So personal services is with BSP. But when you computerize, because you need to be assisted by computers, so that's in the capital outlay? Where is it
Yes.
found in your budget? MOE or capital outlay? Meron yata kayong 27 million sa...
Both.
Both, yun, both. Okay, so...
For the NEP, the maintenance and enhancement of AMLC cybersecurity and database, 59 billion. Ngayon, ang proposed budget nila 155 billion.
Million.
Million, sorry.
Yes.
59 million.
Yes.
Ang proposed nila 155 million.
Okay, so yan ang sitwasyon ng... Para lang makita nga natin yung sitwasyon ng AMLC. Sa threshold amounts pa lang, 23 million transactions yung dapat nyong... Ano ba dapat nyo gawin dyan? Dapat yung i-review o just tinatanggap nyo lang yung report?
There are too many of them, Mr. President. They are reviewed, apparently, but through prioritization.
That's why they need, I think, assistance of computers in reviewing as well as, baka dito nga pasok yung AI baka dito
Doon nga.
more than...
Oo. Well, that's one of the, possibly the benefits of having AI is also to sort through all the voluminous number of reports. On the other hand, they supposedly have a program already that categorizes based on what the priorities are.
Have you been filing cases, AMLC? How many have been filed? And then please give the period, the time period.
So far, the cases filed for 2024 alone are 183 cases. But from 2017 until 2024, Q1 to Q3, about 744 cases have been filed.
And okay, of course these are violations, parang money laundering cases bali ito, no? So okay.
Mga freeze orders, civil forfeiture cases, administrative cases, and formal charges.
Merong any case connected with the Bamban Pogo complex? Kasi ang estimate yata...
There are 87 counts.
87 counts of
87
money
counts.
laundering against
87.
Alice Guo alone.
Pero na-file yung 87 cases after pumutok na rito sa Senate?
Yes,
Yun,
yes,
Thanks to
Mr.
the Senate.
President.
yun na nga. So, I need an explanation. Bakit hindi nyo na-detect before dinetect pa ng opisina ni Senator Risa Ontiveros?
Because of the failure of some covered persons to report through SDRs. And this is also where it will come into play, where the bank representative might have to be investigated as well. But of course, we can't rely solely on what's being reported. That's why, Mr. President, I think if we have an objective system, such as the computerization of the categories, then it will also prompt members of the AMLC to look into it ahead of time, be more proactive. But again, there might be some connivance between their banks, the local representatives of the banks, and also those covered individuals.
And if I may, Minority Leader, distinguished colleague, Senator Grace, I totally agree that we have to be more proactive. And if you look at the complexity of what happened in the case of Alice Go and her cohorts, they intended to create layers and layers of corporations to make it appear that they were somehow engaged in profitable and legitimate businesses. But in fact, they are not. But again, let me share the sentiments of our distinguished chairperson that we have to be more proactive, dear colleagues.
Ito pong mga 744 na kinasuhan natin at saka over a 7-year period, tsaka 183 ngayong taon, may mga maliliit na tao rito na kinasuhan kayo?
Meron, iba-iba na po yan.
Oo nga, pero doon ako madidisappoint kung mayroon mga naunahan pa ng mga maliliit na tao na kasuhan kaysa doon sa mga nagpasok ng billion-billion to construct that Pogo complex, Mr. President. Well, at any rate,
Totoo po yun,
that's
pero,
just a comment.
Mr. President, I share your sentiment. Siyempre, di ba, yun nga sinasabi nila yung mga nagnakaw ng cellphone, bagamat mali yun, sila yung nakapiit ng matagal dahil walang proper representation or walang pambayad ng bail. Kaya yung court system natin, inaayos nga yung bail system. But of course, with the AI project, the massive volume of CTRs and STRs alongside their increasing trend, the aim of the AI project is to enhance AMLC's capability in detecting and preventing money laundering services. It can assist in the discovery of unusual financial transactions and possible illicit financial activities. These are all generalizations that they submitted to me, but that's the hope of having the AI.
Sige, at least na yung 200 million plus pala pang MOOE plus CO. So, yung ano pala yung sa staff, sa personnel, nasa Central Bank. So, well, I think hindi naman nata nagrereklamong AMLC sa level ng ating committee report. So, we wish them all the best, do a better job. Basta do a better job kasi dapat, kaya nga tinanong kung may nakasuhang maliit na tao, tapos yung mga malalaki, na-discover na lang dahil pumutok ng issue, medyo it doesn't speak well of your agency. So do a better job. Dapat yung nagpapapasok ng billion, huli agad. Dapat na-detect na ng system ninyo yun, whether manual or computerized, Mr. President. Kahit manual, dapat huli yun, Mr. President. That's my point. Pero at any rate, I think the AMLC is, in-increase ba siya na? In-increase ng committee ng 50, I think we added 50 million to the budget of the AMLC. So I think, challenge na lang po yun to do more with less or to do more with what was given to you. At we understand that you have to be assisted by some automated system or computerization. Kailangan kasi. Kaya ako pinalabas yun 20 million plus yung rini-review para maintindihan niyo po na it's not an easy job. I mean, 20 million transactions po yung rini-review nila sa 1 year lang ba yun? 3 years? That was a 3-year period, no? Yeah, in
For 2024 alone, 20 plus
for 2024,
million.
yes. Yun na. So, ganun the enormity of the job of the AMLC. Sige. Okay, and if you have some amendments in mind to the law which you are implementing, please give it to us na lang in writing. Sige, para matulungan po kayo. Sige po, but sige. Alam natin na kumikilos sila, nag-file sila ng kaso, maliit man na tao or lalo na sa mga malalaking suspected violators of the anti-money laundering law. So, at least malaman po yan para yung compliance sa law, mas tumaas po ang compliance sa law. So, thank you, Madam Chairperson. Thank you to the AMLC.
Thank you to our Minority Leader. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minority Leader. Madam Chair, I just have one question based on my personal experience. One, I would have to agree with our dear Minority Floor Leader that when it comes to billions of pesos transactions, the AMLA should be more sensitive because we were surprised during the hearings conducted led by Senator Risa Ontiveros that billions of pesos would come from different places in the country, and it appears that AMLA was surprised about this. And looking at the situation, Your Honor, the Philippines is one of the 24 countries under the Financial Action Task Force gray list of countries under increased monitoring for dirty money due to our anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing regime. This is our third, in fact, Your Honor, third straight year na po on the gray list. My only question is, now that POGO has been banned, and we thank the President for issuing an executive order to ban POGO. We have been espousing this initiative since 2016, Your Honors. May we know what other steps can we take to finally exit the gray list, Madam Chair? That's the only question that I have in mind, if you don't mind. Thank you.
As of October, good news daw ito. As of October 2024, FATF plenary, the Philippines has accomplished all 18 action plan items. The FATF made the initial determination that the Philippines has substantially completed its action plan and warrants an on-site assessment to verify that the implementation of the AML-CFT reforms has begun and is being sustained, and that the necessary political commitment remains in place to sustain implementation in the future. So far yung initial submission sa kanila, nakita nila na compliant na tayo. So they just want to see the proper implementation on the ground. Remember when we did the AMLC amendment, Mr. President?
Yes.
I was actually the sponsor of that bill and also the author. We did include a lot of the requirements that were asked of us. For example, to include real estate among one of them, and also the threshold, and also to strengthen the anti-terrorist counter checks. So we've accomplished that. And so from that time until now, what they are already working on is the implementation.
So with these 18 action plan items, and of course, you would agree with me, Madam Chair, that the banning of POGO would help us exit in this gray list. We are expecting that we will be out of the list by next year.
Yes, it shows also the determination of this administration to make sure that businesses that contribute to crime, to contribute to money laundering, are also addressed, eliminated, like the POGOs. But then, of course, it's up to the AMLAC also to be able to file the proper cases and for our courts to resolve it.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and we congratulate your efforts also in ensuring that we'll be out of the gray list, because I remember you have been a staunch supporter in addressing this particular problem. Thank you, Madam Chair. Majority Leader?
Mr. President, there being no other reservation for interpellation, I move that the budget of the Anti-Money Laundering Council be deemed submitted for the body's consideration. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? The Chair hears none. The motion of the Majority Leader is carried. Congratulations to the Anti-Money Laundering Council.
Mr. President, can I ask for a minute suspension?
Session suspended for a minute.
Minority Leader
Leader.
President, I move that we consider the budget of the National Intelligence Coordinating Agency and recognize the sponsor, Senator Grace Poe, Chairperson of the Committee on Finance, and to interpolate the Minority Leader, Senator Aquilino Coco Pimentel Jr.
Is there any objection? The chair hears none. The motion of the Majority Leader is hereby adopted. We recognize the hardworking sponsor of the Senate Committee on Finance, Senator Grace Poe, to sponsor the budget of the National Intelligence Coordinating Agency and to interpolate our Minority Leader, Senator Coco Pimentel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to acknowledge the National Intelligence Coordinating Agency, the NICA family headed by Director General Ricardo De Leon and his team. Mr. President, it is my duty to present to the body the budget of NICA based on the Senate Committee report. NICA's total budget for fiscal year 2025 amounts to 2,797,149,000, composed of 2,743,522,000,000 as new appropriations and 53,627,000,000 as automatic appropriations. With that, this representation is now ready to accept questions.
The most hardworking senator, especially in this particular season of the year, our Minority Leader, Senator Coco Pimentel, is recognized.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. May we have a restatement of the automatic appropriations as mentioned by our chairwoman? For NICA.
53.6 million is the automatic appropriations.
Sige po. Sige po. I have reviewed my interpellation on NICA's budget for the past 2 years. So medyo I think we have already dissected the agency sufficiently. Pero I ask, is there something new planned by NICA for 2025? Do we have something new?
Together with other agencies that have to harness technology, there is the cybersecurity and countering weapons of mass destruction program. There's also the ICT projects, the Security Operations Center, the Data Security Project, Cyber Intelligence Fusion Project, Identity and Access Management Project, etc. So basically, a lot of ICT improvements also.
Yes, but basically to do the same job, to have the same goals, the same objectives as previous years.
Of course, it's really the coordinating count. What NICA's mandate, Mr. President, is basically the security of our country. So the coordination also of the different information that we received, and also the analysis of that information, aside from just gathering intelligence.
Itong NICA, it has CIF. Tama po ba yun? And legitimately, di ba? It's legitimately entitled to CF, which confidential funds, and also legitimately entitled to intelligence funds. And I've noticed the levels, wag na natin i-mention yung amount, I think the levels were retained and are at reasonable levels. So wala na po akong question dyan. But
yes,
yung entirety ba ng IF, Intelligence Fund, of the budget, si NICA ba ang nag-set noon mga yun? Doon sa mga agencies na legitimately, we believe are legitimately entitled to intelligence funds? Did NICA set the level?
it depends on the different agencies. requesting for those IFs or CFs, Mr. President. It is their recommendation, and of course, it's really up to us here in Congress to determine, the Senate and the House of Representatives to determine if they will be able to utilize those accordingly and properly.
Hindi, ang short answer, no touch si NICA sa intelligence fund level requests of the other agencies. You don't.
They have their autonomy
You don't
to
comment. You don't
request.
comment.
No.
Sige po, basta yun lang po yung aking na-observe. Either we retain them from this year's level, tama, so, and I think this is reasonable for our intelligence coordinating agency. And then, of course, just an exhortation or a request that we follow to the letter the joint budget circular governing the usage of CIF. Yun lang naman, just an appeal to the NICA. Although wala naman ako na-encounter na any issue. We looked at the COA report. Wala naman po kaming nakita about the CIF. So, okay, so if there are other questions siguro on some sensitive matters, we will just do it in some confidential or executive sessions, Mr. President. So with that, Mr. President, actually, we really have no further questions on the budget of the NICA. So we wish them all the best, and then sabi nyo, same plan, same objectives, just do it better with lessons learned siguro. I'm sure we are learning lessons over the years, so we will be more efficient as an agency. So good luck to NICA. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you for the consideration of our minority leader for very sensitive topics of the NICA. We appreciate the support.
Thank you, Senator Grace. Thank you, our Minority Leader. Majority Leader?
Mr. President, this representation likewise would submit its full support to the budget of NICA, an agency faced with various challenges on all fronts, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, there being no other reservation for interpellation, I move that the budget of the National Intelligence Coordinating Agency be deemed submitted for the Senate's consideration. I so move, Mr. President.
Is there any objection? The chair hears none. The motion of the Majority Leader is approved.
Mr. President, I
Thank
move
you
for a
and
minute
congratulations.
suspension to enable the members of this chamber to have a photo session with NICA.
Session is suspended for a minute.